After absolution, my wife's parents' breach in our vacation berth for the winter, I went up one weekend to acquisition my name removed from every certificate inside. We fabricated a few changes, her ancestor said. My wife, aloof, smiled and said, "It's still ancestors' property." I collection a back that night, begin the Aboriginal acquirement exceeding in my fireproof safe, and mailed it to one actuality they never expected. Let me alpha by adage. I'm not the blazon of guy who causes scenes. I don't yell. I don't breach things. I try to be fair. That's what makes this accomplished affair chaw alike more. I'm Rob, 42 years old, been affiliated to Tessa for about 10 years. We alive in Missoula, Montana. No kids, which now feels like a abuse miracle. She works part-time at a clinic. I administer architecture crews. We were accomplishing all right. House paid off. Steady income. Annihilation fancy, but solid. About 4 years ago, I bought a baby berth abreast Flathead Lake. It was mine. All my money bought afore we were alike married. I capital a abode area. I could fish, breathe, and not apprehend cartage or accord with anyone's crap. I formed adamantine for that place. It was my spot. I booty Tessa up there sometimes, but honestly, she never cared for it like I did. She admired hotels, Wi-Fi, brunch places. Still, I consistently said it was ours. Aback I talked about it aloof to be kind. I didn't anticipate that would appear aback to chaw me. Afresh came winter 2 years ago. Her dad, Mark, absent his job. Some accounting abutting let him go. Her mom, Lacey, didn't assignment much. Did some ability fair stuff, but annihilation serious. Suddenly, they were in trouble. Couldn't allow their abode in Spokane anymore. Acclaim cards maxed out. Mark was talking about blockage in a berth for the winter. Tessa came to me crying. Said we had to do something. Said they aloof bear time. I wasn't thrilled. The berth was mine. But I told her, okay, if they active a acting agreement, I wrote it myself. Said they could breach through winter, rentrée, but had to leave by May unless we both agreed to extend. They weren't accustomed to accomplish above changes, and that the acreage remained accurately mine. I had it notarized by a buddy. It wasn't fancy, but it was accurately sound. Tessa formed her eyes. They're not strangers, she said. It's aloof for a little while. I should accept to listen to my gut appropriate then. Anyway, they confused in about mid-November. I backward out of it. Let them accept their space. I was active at assignment and ample-eyed appointment in the spring. Every now and then, I'd ask how things were going. Tessa would say things like, "Oh, they corrective the bedfellow room. Looks bigger now. Dad's acclimation the balustrade steps. Mom replaced some of the curtains. It all articulate minor. I didn't anticipate abundant of it." Afresh came April. I had a Saturday chargeless and absentively to drive up aloof for the day. I didn't acquaint Tessa. Capital to abruptness them. Maybe angle a little. I brought beer, some snacks, and my old accoutrement box. But the moment I pulled up the drive, article fell off. There was a new aboudo with a keypad, not a lock I gave them. A metal aboudo I didn't approve. That already had me pissed. Afresh. I absolved up to the advanced aperture and my key didn't work. They had afflicted the locks. I knocked. No acknowledgement at first. I agape harder. Finally, the aperture opened. Mark stood there like he wasn't alike afraid to see me. Aloof leaned on the aperture anatomy and said, "You should accept, alleged ahead." I said, "What the hell happened to my key?" He smiled. That complacent, affectionate of smile. We fabricated a few changes. I stepped inside. He didn't try to stop me, but he didn't absolutely move out of the way either. Lacey was in the kitchen like she endemic the place. Tessa came out of the alley a few abnormal later. She looked appropriate at me and smiled. "It's still ancestors' property," she said. "Like that fabricated it okay. I abandoned her and absolved through the place. Furniture was different. My chair, the recliner I bought with my Aboriginal benefit, was gone. They'd replaced rugs, swapped out artwork. Pictures on the bank were all of them. None of me, not one. I went into the appointment nook. That's area I absented. They had a big adhesive sitting there labeled acreage docs. Flathead. Central were account bills, some receipts, and then, I affirm to God, a affected deed. A affected certificate, assuming. The birth as actuality endemic by Tessa only. They alike printed out some made-up exceeding with scribbles and ammo. Credibility adage actuality like all ancestors has according rights and managed by Mark and Lacey like it was some committee. I looked at Mark. What the hell is this? He shrugged. We aloof put things in order. You didn't assume to affliction about it. Tessa chimed in, sitting bottomward on the armrest like this was a allocution show. You consistently said it was a ancestor's place. We're aloof, authoritative, that real. Didn't yell, I didn't scream. I absolved out, collection home in silence. Aback I got back, I went to my Fireproof safe, pulled out the Aboriginal accomplishment with abandoned my name on it, pulled the notarized exceeding her parents signed. Apprehend every band again. A like acceptance I already knew what it said. Afresh I fabricated copies of aggregate and I beatific them forth with a letter to the one actuality they'd never expect. Tessa's uncle. He's her mom's earlier brother, absolute acreage advocate in Kerdeen. Sharp as a knife. Met him once, maybe twice. He was blunt, no nonsense, and had no adulation for Mark or Lacey. I'd heard belief at barbecues. Old ancestors' beef. Didn't bulk to me. At the time. But now that was leverage. In my letter, I wrote, they're aggravating to booty acreage that's not theirs. I've absorbed the Aboriginal accomplishment and the exceeding they signed. I capital addition in the ancestors to see this. Afore I go the acknowledged route, that was it. No threats, aloof facts. 3 canicule later, I got a call. It was Tessa's uncle. His exact words. Oh, I've been cat and mouse for article like this. So, yeah, Tessa's uncle, his name's Richard, calls me 3 canicule afterwards, I accelerate the documents. Aboriginal affair, he says, is, oh, I've been cat and mouse for article like this. No baby talk, no affected politeness, aloof beeline into it. He asked a few questions. I answered anybody with receipts, photos, the active agreement, the absolute deed, a like account of me continuing al fresco the birth the day I bought it. He didn't aloof accept me, he capital to accept me. Because, allegedly, he had history with Mark and Lacey. Your ancestors approved this affectionate of applesauce years ago, he told me. They wormed their way into Lacey's aunt's acreage and approved to get her to add their names to some farmland in Idaho. I shut that bottomward fast. I asked him, can you help? He goes, I'll adore every additional of it. That aforementioned day. He beatific them a certified letter, cease and desist. Ambitious actual abstraction and admonishing that they'd abandoned the exceeding of a active agreement. He included the absolute deed, told them they were now trespassing. That lit the fuse. The abutting day, Tessa blew up my phone. I abandoned every call. Finally, I best up about 9 p.m. She was agreeable afore I said hello. You got my ancestors threatened with acknowledged action, she shouted. They bankrupt the agreement. I said they approved to effected a deed. That's fraud. They were aloof aggravating to accomplish it feel like home. It's not some algid asset. Rob. It's allotment of the family. I told her it was never allotment of her family's anything. It was mine. I bought it. Paid for every inch. She never put in a distinct cent. Her name wasn't on any paper. Afresh, she abandoned the band that assuredly fabricated it clear. If you had aloof let it go, none of this would except happened. I afraid up. She came home that night furious, tossed her keys, airtight the fridge door, and accused me of aggravating to abort her family. I backward calm. I said, you lied. You approved to abduct from me. That's not family. She started crying, added she didn't apperceive what Mark and Lacey were doing, but I knew better. She stood appropriate there in the berth and smiled aback. I saw the affected documents. She watched me apprehend them like it was a joke. Over the abutting few weeks, things got worse. Richard beatific a academic boot notice, gave them 14 in canicule to abandon the acreage or face court. Instead of packing, they angled down. They filed an address with the Flathead Canton agent, aggravating to almanac their affected certificate as a accurate appellation transfer. Richard bent it immediately. He filed an admonition and beatific them admonishing that if they kept it up, they'd be attractive at abomination artifice charges. Then this allotment blew my mind. They try to comedy dirty. Mark filed a abstinent. Adjustment to join me, claiming I had a parent up at the berth aggressive abandon and aggravating to alarm them into leaving. Said he feared for his and Lacey's safety. Flat out lie. I had never alike aloft my voice, hadn't affected anyone. Richard shut it bottomward in beneath then 48 hours with photos, timestamps, and copies of my mail annal assuming I never fabricated. Acquaintance afresh afterwards that visit. But by now I was done arena defense. I told Richard the aboriginal capital to move advanced with bent accused in a civilian suit. He said, "Good, they've been accepting abroad with this affectionate of applesauce for too long." Ooh, Tessa started acting weird. Quiet, kept to herself. Afresh one night I saw her packing a suitcase. I asked area she was going. "To my sister's," she said. "I can't be about you while you're disturbing my ancestors apart." I told her, collapsed out, "You should go, because I'm not stopping." She left. I didn't try to stop her. A few canicule later, I got an apprehension from a lawyer. She'd assassin an advocate to attending into association acreage laws in Montana. That's a back I accomplished she wasn't aloof active home to Mommy. She was gearing up to try an affirmation bisected the cabin. Adage we were affiliated and it should accept been shared. I gave aggregate to Richard. He laughed. "You bought it years afore the marriage, paid for it with your own money, and it's blue-blooded, abandoned to you. She doesn't accept a case. Still, she tried. Her advocate filed an affirmation that the birth had become conjugal acreage because we'd acclimated it calm during the marriage. Said Tessa had invested affecting activity into the space, and that she believed it to be aggregate property. Richard responded with 43 pages of documentation, receipts, timelines, her own abuse texts, adage things like, "your cabin," and the active exceeding from her parents. That case was befuddled out fast. Meanwhile, Mark and Lacey assuredly confused. Out, not quietly. They larboard debris everywhere, ripped out blind rods, larboard aliment adulteration in the fridge, and alike circling acquisitive adulterated on the barn bank and aerosol paint. I collection up and took photos of everything. Richard included them in the immersement claim. Tessa texted me 2 canicule later. Was it accounted? I didn't acknowledge because I wasn't accomplished yet. Afterwards, the accident they did to the cabin. Richard Brashwe, columnist for Restitution. A civilian immersement case. He said it wasn't aloof about money. Now, this is how you stop them from accomplishing it to addition else. He told me I agreed. We filed. An affirmation for advised acreage damage, adulteration of documents, acknowledged fees, and trespassing. Altogether, the bulk was aloof over $42,000. Richard said it would alarm the hell out of them. I hoped it would, but I additionally hoped they'd appearance up in Cloister because if they did, I capital to attending every distinct one of them in the eye aback the adjudicator apprehend my name off the absolute deed. But afore we alike got to that part, article abroad happened. Article I never saw coming. Richard alleged me one morning. Articulate about amused. "You're not activity to accept this," he said. "Your wife aloof filed to accept her name added to the cabin's deed. Claimed it was bare in error." What? She submitted. A quick affirmation accomplishment artificial acutely to the Canton agent, adage the acreage was meant to be in both names. I couldn't allege for a second. She absolutely filed that. I assuredly said, "Yep." Activate herself. Notarized by addition alleged Becky Alvarez. Appetite to assumption. Who that is? I had to sit down. Becky Alvarez was Tessa's youngest cousin. Aloof, angry 23. I'd apparent her column about accepting her agent authorization online. Tessa roped her into it. Richard had already appeared. He additionally contacted Becky, said she had 48 hours to abjure the apocryphal notarization and abet or face accent charges. Becky bankrupt immediately. She cried on the phone. Allegedly said Tessa begged her to assurance it and told her it was aloof, charwoman, up paperwork. That move afflicted everything. Now it wasn't aloof, a blowsy ancestors fight. Now it was bent forgery, filing apocryphal abstracts with the county, coercing an agent all over a cabin. Richard told me, collapsed. Out. This will go to the DA if we advance it. You accessible for that? I told him I was. I started advancing for court. We were weeks abroad from the civilian balloon for damages, and now Tessa and her parents were additionally adverse the absolute achievability of bent charges. But that wasn't alike the final twist. No, the final aberration came from Addition, who'd been quiet the accomplished time. Addition. I forgot was a like allotment of the picture. Tessa's sister, Mel, she alleged me one night out of nowhere. I hadn't announced to her in over a year. She'd consistently kept her distance. Not rude, aloof, not involved. But she alleged me and said, I charged to allocution to you in person. We met at a coffee boutique in Missoula. She looked exhausted. Sat down, didn't alike adjustment anything. Aloof stared at the table and said, They've been planning this aback after most year. I aloof sat there. She went on. Mom and Dad, Tessa, too. I overheard them talking about appointment the cabin, about aggravating to appearance it as aggregate property. They capital to fix it up. Afresh try and cast it afterwards, cogent you. Mark kept adage it was too acceptable an asset to waste. Tessa agreed. I anticipation they were aloof venting. I didn't anticipate they'd go this far. I asked her, Why? Are you cogent me this now? She looked up and said, Because Tessa came to me after most anniversary and asked me to lie. She capital me to affirm that you told her the birth would be chastening one day, that you said it was our approaching ancestors' home. She, alike, had a accounting account ready. My abdomen dropped. Mel continued, I'm not accomplishing that. You've consistently been acceptable to me, and this isn't right. You charge to apperceive what they're accommodating to do. She handed me a manila envelope. Central was a printed email Celia amid Tessa, Mark, and Lacey. It was anachronous from months ago. They were talking about the Avenue plan, discussing whether to effect it a co-ownership story, and alike talking about how Rob won't action if we bend him emotionally. They wrote that Rob won't action if we bend him emotionally. I capital to puke. Mel looked me in the eye and said, I'll affirm if you charge me. I nodded. I couldn't alike acknowledge her. My jaw was locked. I gave aggregate to Richard. He apprehended through it all and said, Where activity broiled earth. But the craziest part, we still hadn't alike been to Cloister yet. The day of the Cloister audition came fast. We absolved into Flathead Canton Commune Cloister with boxes of documents. Richard looked calm as ever. I was abutting, but focused. Mark and Lacey sat on the added ancillary of the courtroom, whispering, dressed like they were headed to church. Tessa sat amid them, accoutrements crossed, attractive board. They didn't accompany a lawyer. I assumption they anticipation they could allocution their way out. Big mistake. The adjudicator looked through the packet. Richard gave him aboriginal deed, notarized agreement, emails from Mel, the artificial quick affirmation deed, alike Becky Alvarez's active account acceptance. She was tricked. The adjudicator took his time. Account it all. Afresh, he looked beeline at Mark and said, "Sir, do you accept the calmness of falsifying acreage buying and attempting to almanac a affected title?" Mark opened his mouth, but the adjudicator cut him off. "I'm not allurement for a speech. Aloof a yes or no." Mark said yes. Tessa approved to allege up, but Richard stood up immediately. "Your Honor, I'd like to abide a appeal for actual arbitrary judgment on all damages, as able-bodied as a barometer to the commune advocate for bent investigation." The adjudicator agreed. Aloof like that, blast of the gavel. In advance of the accomplished courtroom, the adjudicator disqualified that I was the sole acknowledged owner. He ordered Mark and Lacey to pay $42,680 in damages, repairs, cleanup, acknowledged costs, and cloister fees. He referred both of them for bent analysis over the affected abstracts and acreage fraud. Afresh came Tessa. The adjudicator looked appropriate at her and said, "I've apparent a lot of bodies try to weasel their way into acreage they didn't earn. But you went out of your way to plan it. You acclimated ancestors to affected acknowledged documents. You approved to dispense the court. If I had the ascendancy today, I'd bandy you in Bastille myself." She didn't say a word. Al fresco the courtroom. She approved. To allocution to me. I didn't stop walking. She said, "I was scared." Okay. I didn't appetite to lose everything. I angry about and said, "You absent aggregate because you never had it. You aloof area to get a budding to it." I served her with annulment affidavit to canicule later. Richard handled it fast. She approved afresh to affirmation allotment of the cabin. She bootless again. Mark and Lacey couldn't pay the damages. They concluded up accepting sued, accident their retirement condo, and now alive in a baby rental on the bend of Spokane. Their acclaim is wrecked. No one in the continued ancestors talks to them anymore. Not afterwards, the accuracy came out. As for Becky Alvarez, she absent her agent authorization and had to pay a fine, but she got off easier than she could have. I let that slide. She was adolescent and dumb, not malicious. Tessa approved to clean her image, acquaint some sad nonsense. On Facebook about betrayal and the authoritative bedmate who angry her ancestors adjoin her. Nobody bought it. Abnormally afterwards, Mel acquaint the email screenshots in the comments. Tessa confused out of accompaniment a few months later. After most I heard, she was alive part-time at a salon in Boise. Still application her beginning. Name again. Good. As for me, I kept the cabin, spent a few weekends charwoman it up, anchored what they broke, alter what they tossed, afraid a new assurance by the advanced porch. No trespassing, no exceptions. But I additionally abstruse article from all of it. I let a lot slide. I capital accord so badly, I abandoned admonishing signs. I put affability afore boundaries. That was my mistake. I won't do that again. I go to the berth about every added weekend now, alone, sometimes with friends. I fish, I chop wood, I sit on the balustrade with a beer and accept to the trees. And every time I do, I smile because the bodies who approved to abduct it are the ones who absent everything. And me, I assuredly got it back. Not aloof the cabin, my peace, my self-respect, and the achievement of alive they'll bethink what they did. Every distinct day, they death watch up broke, bitter, and powerless. That's what absolute animus looks